You are listening to X-Wing Radio.
Welcome back, clones, droids, and Jedi alike. I'm David, that's Wesley, and you just tuned in to X-Wing Radio, your weekly broadcast from a galaxy far, far away.
Yep. I never know what to say when
That's
you
all
get
you
done
got?
with that.
That's all
Well,
you
okay,
got?
here's the thing. All right, so you got this whole big scripted line, right? And then I got to come in and think of something on the spot week to week. All right, so I don't have anything clever to say, David. Gosh. Anyway, so today you clicked on this video, or this video auto played because you're listening to something Star Wars related or some other reason. But anyways, today we are talking about the Clone Wars season 2. So last month we talked about season 1, broke that down, went through our thoughts on it. And we're gonna do the same thing today. We're gonna go through the season and go through the different story arcs, give our thoughts on the whole season, and sum it up a little bit for you. So, David, I'm gonna go ahead and be honest with you. I was two episodes short of watching this whole entire season, and we talked about it last week. How neither one of us had started watching this. Well, in between when we talked last and today, I had a project due for school and a midterm. So I did my best to watch everything, watch this whole episode. I've basically been watching Clone Wars all day. So it's fresh in my mind, but I also haven't watched the last two episodes. I remember the general premise of them, but I'll let you kind of take the wheel on those. But yeah, just putting that out there. Just putting that out there. I'm a
So,
little unprepared.
yeah, I was way behind on it as well. I realized yesterday I'd only finished 2 episodes. I did finish the season. I just put it on and listened to most of it at work. Watched when I could, listened to most of it, but I did finish it.
Yeah, I almost texted you yesterday and was like, "Hey, do you want to switch our schedule up so that we don't have to do this?" And then I thought about it because I was like, "Oh yeah, me and David are both gonna show up tomorrow," and he's gonna be like, "Yeah, I didn't watch it all of it either," and I'd be like, "Yeah, me neither." It's like maybe we should talk about this, but then I was like, "No." So David can listen to it at work. He'll probably be fine. I was like, so I gotta start punching these episodes in. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm honestly not gonna lie. I'm a little tired of it right now. I'm gonna need to make sure I get a better start on it for next month's season 3. But yeah, I'm a little tired of it now because I've been watching it pretty much nonstop since this I have very limited time to watch TV, for anyone wondering. But any time that I have has been filled with watching the Clone Wars, so I'm a little tired of it right now. Um, but we're gonna get all that information out today, and I can go back to watching my normal shows. So, all right, David. So let's start off with the beginning of the season. So, real quick, the season starts off with Cad Bane. Now, as we talked about in the end of last season, the season ended with Cad Bane. So they saw how the success of Cad Bane, and I guess that people just showed that they love the character, and they brought him back for a season opener. And the season opener that is pretty good. It's a pretty good one. It's a really good display of just the skills of Cad Bane. So I know at the end of the last season, they show him infiltrate and take hostages. That those hostages being the Senate's, not the Senate, but senators in a Senate building. So that's pretty reasonable feat. I mean, this is a high security place. Well, this season steps it up a little bit, with episode one being called the Holocron Heist. Well, where are holocrons, David? Holocrons are in the Jedi Temple. Well, that's basically walking into, you know, one of the most, if not the most secure place in the universe.
The almost the real world equivalent would be like actually literally the real world equivalent would be like walking into the Vatican to steal something out of the archives.
Yeah.
That's
Let's just put it this way, David. Let's put it this way. Because the first thing that popped into my mind was it's not the same scenario or anything, but essentially Cad Bane is making getting out of Alcatraz child's play. And I mean, obviously, he does this multiple times with the way that he goes through his planning. There is later on in the series a time that he does break out of prison. Obviously, their prison is nothing like Alcatraz, but it's still high security and all that stuff. But essentially, Cad Bane just basically takes the things that are said, "Hey, this is impossible." I think even at the beginning of the episode, he even mentions that it's basically a death wish to go in and trying to break into the holocron vault. And when his reputation comes into play here, and is maybe, hey, you're not living to your up to your reputation, he says, "Okay, I got this. Just it's gonna cost more."
mm,
And he essentially he goes through with the plan flawlessly. Um, Again, I want to note, uh, this is a three part. Wait, no, three part,
yeah,
two part. It's a
it's the
three part.
first
Yeah,
of the Magic of the Holocron arc, which is 3 episodes.
yeah. So
Um,
it's a three part arc, but that follows Cad Bane. Essentially, he is still the antagonist through all of this. But it's crucial to note that throughout all of this, Cad Bane still comes on out on top.
yeah. So this first episode, Holocron Heist, as you mentioned, is the name. Originally aired, of course, on Cartoon Network on October 2nd, 2009. We're old. Like,
Hey, David,
the fact that
I want to mention this because I saw it right before I got on. I know you don't listen to like rap or anything, but I know you are aware who Eminem is. I just saw a post of his daughter revealing to him that he's about to be a grandpa. Now, Eminem is someone that I've listened to for a long time, and finding out that someone like him is about to be a grandpa is a little weird. So, like you mentioned, talking about these episodes coming out, and that being so long ago, I know you sent me a post that I just saw today. You might have sent it today. I don't know when you sent it. I was looking at a bunch of the stuff you sent me today. But anyways, talking about what was it, 13 years ago, or 10 years ago?
talking about Rebels coming out, yeah,
Rebels
yeah.
aired 10 years ago. Yeah, and obviously you and I can both remember a
So,
time before Rebels was a thing. So
and
yeah,
this was
David, we're
15
getting
years
older.
ago. And this was 15 years ago, 2009. Actually,
Uh huh.
almost exactly 15 years ago, because this, we're recording this on October 3rd. This episode is going to come out on whatever Monday is. I think that's the 7th. Um, but still, season 2 of the Clone Wars started a year ago, or started 15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago yesterday. Yeah, that is crazy. That's it's that old.
Mm.
Um, but anyways, yeah, let's go ahead and dive into to more of the this specific arc to kind of dive into the story of it all. Um,
Well,
and then we can head back into the season.
I think you pretty much summed up a lot of this episode. This episode doesn't really have a lot of like really super detailed story to it. I mean, the basic premise of it is, Cad Bane breaks into the Jedi Temple to steal a holocron.
Hmm.
But the interesting parts of the episode is how he does it, and if you want, we can get a little bit into that. I don't really remember all the details well enough. If you do, you can get into it. But basically the holocron he's stealing, or basically Sidious hires him to steal the holocron that holds the information of all of the force-sensitive children in the galaxy, or the known force-sensitive children in the galaxy. So the
Hmm.
future Jedi.
Yeah. I do want to note this. Um, it is interesting. So, part of why Cad Bane is such an interesting character, and part of why Cad Bane 9 times out of 10 comes out on top throughout the Clone Wars, is because he outsmarts the Jedi, specifically the Jedi. Um,
Mm.
whenever he's going up against them. So last week we talked about Thrawn. What is it with blue people over here outsmarting the Jedi so easily?
Blue people with red eyes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't.
I was just thinking about. I was sitting there looking at him, and I was like, if you just gave a vague description, he'd be exactly like Thrawn.
Yeah. Now,
But yeah, no, like you said though, this episode's pretty easy to sum up. I mean, he breaks into the vault and steals a holocron. Obviously, along the way, he outsmarts them, and the next episode opens up with them on the chase for him and the holocron because of the sensitive information that it has on it.
because he also succeeds in um, stealing the holocron, which brings us into episode 2, Cargo of Doom, which also released on October 2nd, 2009. Um, Also, just point out because I know we went over it at the end of the episode last time we talked about Clone Wars, but the quote for episode 1 was "A lesson learned is a lesson earned." The quote for
Hmm.
this episode 2, is overconfidence is the most dangerous form of carelessness. So basically, the premise of this episode is Cad Bane needs to find someone to open the holocron, because only a
Hmm.
Jedi can open the holocron. Do you remember his name, the Jedi's name that he tracks down?
I do not remember the guy's name. Hey, real quick before we go too much further, how's your connection? Because you're cutting in and out a little bit, and mine's saying that it's good. It hasn't dropped off any, so I was wondering if there was something on your end or not.
Yeah, mine's kind of fluctuating. Um, well, now it says I'm good.
So you're coming through clear now. Just you've been in and out a little bit before, and it's making it hard to follow up.
All right. Well, if it gets worse, I'll switch over to my hotspot.
Let's say I've kind of forgotten just going straight to the hotspot now, just because everything else is a little too finicky. So usually, if I stick on the hotspot, I'm good. But hey, right now you might be glitching a little bit. Anyways, if it gets worse, I hope you froze.
No, I'm still here.
Now your eyes are now your eyes are on your cheeks.
I can still hear you
Yeah, the
just
picture's
fine,
all
so
over the place.
I don't know what.
That's fine. I want you to hear me say these things. I wouldn't say them to nobody.
Mhm. Okay, let me
Defeats the purpose. The joys of doing a podcast remote. Internet complications has been a
luckily
constant.
for you guys listening at home, it won't be stuttery because we're recording separately.
Yeah, yeah.
There's still a problem
Uh,
if
the,
Wesley and I can't hear each other.
Yeah, we're at odds, or not at odds, but we're having issues. But that doesn't mean anyone else is experiencing anything. So
Yeah. Anyway, while I try to figure this out, why don't you go ahead and sum up episode 2?
okay, yeah. So if I'm remembering correctly, which don't quote me on this. Um, I think one of the important things within all this is that trying to remember how it ends. I know there comes a point in it. So Cad Bane has part of the fleet. Has his own ship or whatever while he's trying to interrogate this other Jedi. Um, and Anakin and Ahsoka come in and come to the rescue. But anyways, in the process, Anakin and Ahsoka and their forces board the ship, and Cad Bane. Now I remember how it laid out. Cad Bane decides, since he ended up not being able to get this other Jedi to work out, had to end up killing him in the process. He's going to try and take one
Bola
of
Rapal.
either. And you got the guy's name?
Master Bola Rapal. Yep.
Bowler or Paul. Anyways, so this other Jedi, because that's too complicated to say. Um, he uh he he tries to separate the two, so he ends up taking Ahsoka off by herself. Now, this again just shows how not even just that how he outsmarts him. Obviously, like no offense to Ahsoka, but this is Ahsoka in her early stages, right? There is so much learning for Ahsoka to do, and it's really honestly fun to watch as she is learning through all these processes because we here are sitting and we are able to look ahead and be like, hey, I know where she ends up, and this is just the building blocks to get her there. And so a lot of like the different elements that kind of round her character out, like we're seeing the building blocks of that. But anyways, so he draws her away, captures her, which she he makes the comment. He says, "You're not going to be a challenge," and she's like, "Oh yeah." And then despite looking like he got defeated, she's really not a challenge for him. Like I don't know
Hmm.
what his initial plan was, how he wanted to take her down, but the fight wasn't long, and he still came out on top. So I wanted to make that reference because of the fact of the quote at the beginning: "The overconfidence is the most dangerous form of carelessness," and she is a little careless in this, and it's because she was slightly overconfident, which is something that she deals with a lot throughout the series, and Anakin deals with a lot, despite the fact that he comes out on top a lot. He still deals with. He's just a higher class, he still can come out on top even being careless sometimes. Um but anyways, episode ends with Anakin having opened the holocron to save Ahsoka's life. Cad Bane escapes, but he escapes in the form of killing one of the troopers and taking his uniform. Now they think Cad Bane is dead because what they see is the trooper shooting Cad Bane off of a balcony, and then the trooper comes and gets in the ship with him. But that's how the episode ends. And the way that they play this out, you're kind of unsure if Cad Bane is really alive or dead. Which it's interesting. So they do this at the end of episode 2, make you think that Cad Bane is dead. Well, they had a two-part premiere for season 2. Episode 1, Holocron Heist. Episode 2, Cargo of Doom. Both releasing on the 2nd. Well, after you find out Cad Bane might be dead, you had to wait a week to find out what actually happened. So that
Hmm.
is one interesting thing that when you're watching it, you're like, oh, I can just skip over to this next one and I know what happens. Well, back in the day, we didn't have streaming services, so we couldn't do that. But
Hmm.
anyways,
Which, of course, brings us into episode 3, like you just pointed out, were released a week later on October 9th, 2009,
mhm.
titled Children of the Force. The quote at the beginning of this episode was the first step in correcting a mistake is patience. Now, this episode, I believe, begins with revealing that Cad Bane's not actually dead because they're on the cruiser getting ready to head back to Coruscant, and that's when Cad Bane makes his escape, steals a ship, and all that.
Yeah.
Um, Now in this episode, we see Cad Bane actually using the list of younglings to go and, well, kidnap kids.
Yeah, it's interesting um to note that in the like in the bounty hunter community, there are a couple of different types of bounty hunters, and he's on the villain side. Like he'll do whatever as long as he gets paid. He tends to work
Mm,
with the separatists. He tends to work with the villains, um, just because you know he's not looked at kindly by the Republic. And it's because he does stuff like this. Whereas in the later episode, later down in the season, we come in contact with a couple other bounty hunters that are actually protecting a village. And it's like, well, Cad Bane wouldn't ever really do something like that. That doesn't really fit his MO. Uh, but, it's like a spectrum of bounty hunter. It is interesting
mm,
to see that throughout the Clone Wars. But yeah, he's capturing kids, which again we do see him do this uh in not Rebels, sorry,
Bad
in
Batch.
Bad Batch. We see him doing that again, but he's capturing children here, and in the process, he ends up getting captured by Anakin and Ahsoka. Um, Now, I also want to mention with this, just again, whether it's the level of resistance Cad Bane has or the willpower or whatever it is. Um, Cad Bane essentially resists three Jedi trying to probe his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Three, actually no, let me stand corrected. I was about to say three Jedi Master. Sorry, two Jedi Master and Anakin.
Is Obi-Wan on the council at this point?
Oof. I'm not entirely sure when Obi-Wan gets put on the council. I think in the Clone Wars we do see him on the council, but I know in the movie order, by the time we see him in Revenge of the Sith, he's on the council, but obviously he's not at the end of or by the time uh Attack of the Clones is around. So it's somewhere in between the two. I don't know when the specific point is.
Either way, either way. I mean,
I mean, Obi-Wan is still a
Obi-Wan.
master at this point.
Yeah,
Anakin's never trained a knight, Padawan to knighthood, so he's not classified there yet.
yeah. So basically, throughout this episode, we see. Well, I think Cad Bane succeeds in kidnapping one Force-sensitive child on.
Two.
Just two.
At the end of the episode, there's two kids.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's in the process of capturing the third on Naboo, from the Gungans when he gets captured.
Yep, yeah.
I
So,
don't remember where the other two are though. I don't remember the planets that the other two come from.
well, I know the one of them is the same species as like Greedo and the Jedi from the last episode. I don't remember what that species is. But one of them is
Anyways,
that species. Anyway, yeah. So he kidnaps two children and takes them to Mustafar, where Palpatine has this uh like nursery almost set up, but like prison nursery. I don't know.
yeah, I'm not entire. In all honesty, like I understand kind of what he's getting at, but they don't dive a whole lot into Palpatine's plan at this point. So it's he just has this research facility of sorts
Yeah,
on Mustafar.
yeah. So, um, yeah, when he in the process of kidnapping the third child, um, basically the Jedi are able to get ahead of him, figure out where he's headed to next, and get there before he does, and set a trap. They end up
Hmm.
catching him, but they still have the two kids that they have to find. So
Yeah.
they use actually correct me if I'm wrong. His ship memory was wiped, so they can't tell what systems he went to, correct?
Yeah, so his system was, but his fueling log wasn't, which is how they figure
Correct.
out that Mustafar was the place to go. But what ends up happening with them trying to find, okay, so there's two parts to this story. One is that Mace Windu and Obi-Wan go with Cat Bane, once he resists the mind probing, but he doesn't want to sit through it again, so he tells them that take them to the holocron, where he has the holocron at, which is where Obi-Wan and Mace Windu go. While they're gone, Anakin and Ahsoka are searching the ship and see that the fuel log hasn't been wiped, which shows that Mustafar is a place that he has stopped, which is kind of out of the way of the other planets that he was at. So that's why they go check out Mustafar,
Mm,
and which is where they find the children. Now, in the process of Mace Windu and Obi-Wan going to find the holocron, um, Cad Bane ends up escaping in that process. And they do get the holocron back. Uh, and so, so by the end of this episode, Cad Bane has escaped. Mace Windu and Obi-Wan have retrieved the holocron. And they said there also was no evidence that there had been any copying of the list. So supposedly at this point in time, nobody the list of the force sensitive children is not out. And then the two children are saved from Mustafar. So
mm.
that's kind of how this episode concludes.
That brings us to episode 4, which is a standalone episode entitled Senate Spy. The episode released on October 16th, 2009, and the quote at the beginning is, "A true heart should never be..." So, Wesley, what do you think about this episode? Just your general thoughts first
So,
off.
you know, I want to say this much. I forgot, honestly, props to the Clone Wars developers, right? Because they basically in this episode just embodied what everyone loved about the prequels, right? Like, everyone's favorite prequels movie is definitely Attack of the Clones. And why is that? Because everyone loves a good love story. Like, I mean, David, come on. We've talked about Attack of the Clones on the channel. What was the best part of it? Anakin and Padme's love story was the best part. Said no one ever. But anyways, we get to see more of that here. And even though it's a little bit, actually, no, what am I saying? It's still bad in this too. Like, I watched the beginning of this episode and kind of zoned out for the rest of it. Because the beginning of it opens up with Anakin and Padme, and they're doing other little thingamabobbers. And, it's what they're having their night alone. You know what that means. Anyways, Luke and Leia. So, uh, it's just one of those things where I don't know why this episode's in here. There's obviously more to it, but I don't know why this episode's in here. Also, can we talk about the fact that I know what Padme's wardrobe looks like, but like they're making a kids show. Animators, keep it in your pants. Like, put some clothes on Padme. What is she wearing in these episodes? Like, I don't understand half of the designs for the dresses that she's wearing. Anyways, I digress. This episode was a little bit of a bore. Obviously, it
So,
talks about, has different factors in it that may or may not be important. But for the most part, the general idea of the story is that there's a senator that's an old friend of Padme's, and because of this, Anakin gets a little jealous. And then by the end of it, he's like, "Oh, I trust you." It's like whatever.
Yeah. So basically, the Senator Clavis, who like, I don't honestly don't know what's worse, that character or the crappy like romance story between Anakin and Padme, because I hate Clavis. I don't.
This episode is trash. This episode is whatever the name of the other episode was last season
Bombad Jedi.
with Jar Jar. Bombad
Bombad Jedi.
Jedi. This is the
Yep.
Bombad Jedi of season 2.
Yeah.
Clavis is a Bombad Jedi.
So yes. Um. Yeah. Basically, the premise of it is Senator Clavis is working with the Separatists to fund droid factory somewhere, and Padme is sent to spy on him. That's basically the premise of the episode. Um,
Yeah,
and through all this, she ends up getting poisoned, and they have to save her, and all this and that. It's as you can tell, I'm not really high on this episode.
I'm gonna be honest. It's a standalone episode. It doesn't have much to do with the story. If you love the smoochy scenes from Attack of the Clones, then just watch this episode on repeat. But anyways, um, I don't have much to say about this one. But what I do have a lot to say about is the next 4 episodes, the longest, biggest arc that we have in season 2, the 4 episode arc of the return to Geonosis. Um, starting with episode 5, landing at Point Rain. Um, I honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and say this, David. There are a lot of episodes in this season I did not remember watching. Like I vaguely remembered, but I didn't know remember like a lot about the episodes. And this was one arc that I didn't remember vividly. Um,
Well,
but this is
I remember the
huh?
back half of this arc better than the first half, but
You're cutting in and out again.
I said I remember the back half of this arc better than I remember the first half of the arc.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but
But
yeah,
this is a really good arc.
mm,
Hmm?
I didn't say anything.
Oh,
I thought you were talking.
you've been a little in and out just in the past minute, so I wasn't sure.
Okay. Anyway,
I didn't want to
yes.
interrupt.
Um, yeah. Starting with
Yeah,
I think
I really just don't want to interrupt you.
okay. Well, I think you already
I'd never try to interrupt you whatsoever.
okay.
Any interruptions that I do is always on accident. It's definitely because the internet's cutting in and out.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts
And
on this, David? This episode set.
enough playing around. We actually can talk.
I know. We've been on for a minute, so we need to get this going. So,
And we're only at episode
anyways,
5. So.
yeah. Well, anyways, all right, David, go ahead.
All right. So
I will shut up for realsies.
I'm gonna sum up. I'm gonna talk about the first 2 episodes together because they're kind of. I mean, it is a 4 episode arc, but it's almost like a two-parter and a two-parter that are connected. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. Hmm.
So the episodes 5 and 6, landing at Point Rain. and Weapons Factory, coming out on November 4th and November 13th of 2009, respectively. Um, the quotes are, for episode 5, believe in yourself or no one else will. In episode 6, no gift is more precious than trust. So, this is actually where we're first. So we did see Luminara last season. But Luminara is back in these two episodes, of course, with her apprentice Barasafi. This is when we first see Barasafi in the Clone Wars. Um, Essentially, the Geonosians have started building battle droids again. Or I should say, one Geonosian specifically, Toggle the Lesser, has built up a giant droid factory. So they have to go back to Geonosis after like just being there like a year before and take out this droid factory. Um, so through all this, they go through a bunch of stuff, and essentially, I think the first episode is them getting to the droid factory, and then the second episode is them actually attacking the droid factory, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. So like the episode states, it's landing on at Point Rain. The whole entire gist of the first episode is they're trying to get to this specific point, which seems like it should be a simple task because it's one simple landing spot, but they get shot down. Kenobi. So there's three Jedi going through in this. They got Kenobi, Anakin, and Kaida all going down to the planet's surface to help take out the droid factory. That is their whole entire goal. They are trying to retake Geonosis. Geonosis? Geono- Anyways. Blah, 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 blah. But that's their whole entire goal. But the first episode dives into the fact that Kenobi ends up getting to the point. He has to hold this rendezvous point while both Mundi and Anakin get there. And the episode just kind of goes through each faction holding their ground and then the two getting to the rendezvous point. Now, once they get to the rendezvous point, they do take care of the battle that's happening at that point in time. But they need to regroup. They need those many men, loss of life, injured men. Kaidi Mundi's been injured, so he has to leave. Part of why Luminara comes in. Um, and so that's how that episode ends with all that going on. And then, like you said, episode 2 is them breaking down how they're going to infiltrate and destroy the factory. Now I do want to mention this, and David, we're watching through the Clone Wars, so at some point I'm sure I'm bound to find it. But if you know, or if anyone watching this knows, comment down below. I've heard it said many times that it's a nice idea that in Attack of the Clones, that the clone that got shot off of the gunship with Padme is Rex, but that Rex at some point says that he wasn't a part of the Battle of Geonosia, or the first battle at least. Um, I don't vividly remember at what point he says that, but we do get the point that Cody says that he was not a part of the first Battle of Geonosis. Because he mentions that when Obi-Wan is talking to him, and he says, "Oh yeah, it was very fun. I was chained up, and was getting attacked by giant, what does he call them, animals or bugs or whatever." Um, but Cody mentions that he was not a part of the first battle. Now I don't know if later on maybe Rex just says that he's not like says something about his designation where he talks about he wasn't part of the first wave of clone troopers or what it is specifically that is the reason behind why or if he actually says it. I don't remember. But if you remember, David, you can tell me now. Or if someone else listening to this later on remembers, comment it down below because I don't remember that, and I'm curious about that.
I seem
'Cause
to
I know I've
remember it,
heard
but I
that
don't know
many
what.
times.
I seem to remember that, but I don't know where it's from. Um, Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it at some point, I'm sure. Um,
We'll get to it at some point. So, but anyways,
yeah.
continue. That was just an interesting
So
point I had.
yeah. So episode 6, of course. Basically, Luminara and Anakin lead direct assault on the droid base, while Ahsoka and Barriss sneak through the catacombs underneath to plant bombs to destroy the factory. Basically, Luminara and Anakin are distracting the droid forces so Barriss and Ahsoka can actually get in there.
Mhm.
There's stuff going wrong. The Ahsoka and Barriss have to use an experimental tank that the Separatists have to actually destroy the facility. Pretty much
Mhm.
bringing it down on top of them. And then, of course, they do that whole thing where for a second, are they dead? Are they alive? Of course, they end up doing a lot,
Yeah.
being safe through all that,
It,
but still.
now I do want to make this point within this. I have a lot of like interesting um I found in some of the later episodes found myself having my own viewpoints on some of the Star Wars politics that come into play later on in the season. But there's also a thing that I had a point of view on in this or my own opinion on in this, where so Luminara is very not necessarily unconcerned, but we're just gonna say unconcerned about what happened with Ahsoka and Barisafi. She isn't very concerned about looking for them, despite the fact that if they act quickly, they probably could save them, which is what ends up happening, obviously. But they do that because Anakin is gung ho on, you know, saving and rescuing Ahsoka. Now, what Luminar says throughout all this is that okay, in summary, what she's basically getting at is as a Jedi, you kind of have to be willing to accept the will of the Force, right?
Mhm.
And if it's their time, then it's their time. So, that's it. But the thing is they could have let Ahsoka and Barisafi die. But because Anakin was proactive, they didn't. So my point with all this is if you don't do, you can sit around all day long doing nothing. And just because that's the outcome doesn't necessarily mean that's the will of the Force, you know? Which is kind of it is a thing to think about within all this. Because, like, the lack of initiative that Luminara takes can sometimes be a problem, you know? Like, she's so calm and reserved, but sometimes that lack of emotion can be a problem. As much as too much emotion can be a problem. As we see later on with Anakin's arc throughout Star Wars. But because of his attachment to Ahsoka, he ends up saving their lives. And honestly, through that life saved, millions others, down the road. But, that was one thing that came to my mind was like, you know, I just saw, I mean, obviously, I think, the audience is supposed to see it from Anakin's standpoint. But it's so hard to understand how someone like Luminar can be so detached from it all to think that it's okay to essentially just give up on it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that is an interesting point to that. Now, again, like I said, those two episodes are really like a two-parter because the story is like more heavily connected than the next two episodes. Basically, the
Yeah.
only or the biggest connection between those two episodes and the next two episodes are, of course, Geonosis. and Poggle the Lesser. This is
Hmm.
because Poggle the Lesser escaped the factory before it got destroyed. So,
Yeah.
coming on in episode 7, Legacy of Terror, first airing on November 20th, 2009. Of course, it starts off with them looking for Poggle the Lesser on Geonosis. The quote for this episode is, "Sometimes accepting help is harder than offering it." Um, so basically, this episode is not really a whole lot of story to again, but basically they track down Paul the Lesser to this temple on Geonosis, where they come in contact with the Geonosian Queen. And so I'm kind of surprised that these episodes aired in November and not October.
I know. I was watching them and I was like, we're talking about them in the right month because they're well, essentially, what we're getting at and what you're getting at with this is, I mean, they're essentially zombies in this. So, you know,
Mm,
it is kind of surprising that they didn't air at that point in time. But
yeah,
yeah, we're talking about them on the right time.
yeah. So basically, the Geonosian Queen, when she lays
Hmm.
eggs, has these little worm things that come out that I guess are baby Geonosians that I'm not even sure, but basically there's these little worm things that will inhabit the bodies of naturally dead Geonosians, basically turning them into zombies.
Hmm.
But as we find out at
It's
the
kind
end
of
of
like
this
a it's kind of like a hive mind.
yeah, but as we find out at the end of this episode, they can also inhabit any other life form, even living
Dead or
life
alive.
forms, yeah, dead or alive, and control anything.
Hmm.
Also, why I say it's like the Halloween thing is because the worm thing that goes up your nose is kind of just,
Not a fun experience.
yeah.
But yeah, so for most of the Legacy of Terror episode 7, the gist of the whole thing is they're going down there because Luminara went ahead of everyone and ended up getting captured. And so
Mm,
Obi-Wan and Anakin have to go and rescue her. And in the process, they crush the queen, collapse the catacombs, and escape. Well, then we open up on episode 8, and in this episode, at the beginning of it, um, what ends up happening is there's a supply run. Essentially, there's a supply run that needs to be made, and so Barriss, and Ahsoka are going to head up that. And one of the clones that is on the supply run uh, gets infected by the worm, and on the ship he spreads the infection. He has other eggs, and basically the whole entire crew gets infected. And so that's what episode 8 is about.
episode 8, titled Brain Invaders, which one thing I want to point out came out on December 4th, 2009, which was 2 weeks after the episode before. So
Hmm.
the episode before, episode 7, ends on this clone getting infected.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait 2 weeks for the resolution of this.
Yeah. The
Anyway,
quote for this one is attachment is not compassion.
yeah, so this also kind of continues that you know, kind of creepy crawly theme from the last one.
Hmm.
Of course with the worms and stuff. So basically, like you said, the crew gets infected. Barriss actually also gets infected. I believe the only one on the ship who's not is Ahsoka and Anakin. So the reason that Ahsoka and Barriss go off by themselves because Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Luminara go with the rest of the fleet to take Poggle the Lesser back to Coruscant. So
And they need to
through all the
question him for information and all that
yeah,
fun stuff.
so through all this, Anakin gets information out of Poggle the Lesser by they don't spell
How?
it, or yeah, they don't show it, but they kind of imply that he tortures him to basically figure out how to get rid of the worms. And it's cold, so he sends a transmission to Ahsoka telling her that, so she has to go and rupture the coolant lines on the ship to cool down the ship and kill all the worms.
Mm-hmm. Which ends up working, and everyone's fine.
Working?
Now, I do want working. All right, David, I'm working on it. So, but anyways, let me just add. So the worms are about this long. That's what they look like.
Mm,
That's probably at least a foot long, maybe longer. Where are they? Because here's the thing. They gotta be doing some brain damage up there. Because my first thought, before Barriss got infected, because it's been a while since I've watched these, I forgot that Barriss got infected. And it's like, alright, they're dead. The clones were alive, but now they're dead. Because a worm going up their nose and then into their brain, it's gotta kill someone, right? It's gonna at least get rid of some of the brain tissue up there. But they're fine. Like Barrisoppi's just fine. Where is the worm?
that is a good question that I do not want to think about.
Is it just snuggling on up next to the brain? Just like, ooh, this is nice and warm. And then he goes, ooh, this is cold, and it dies. Like, I don't know. But like, yeah, it gave me, I held my nose when it was on screen because it was whipping up and around. And I was thinking
especially
about that with,
especially
mm,
that one scene that's actually the picture on the list of the episodes here we have, where with Ahsoka right there in Barris, the worm coming out of her mouth. It's just
yeah. Well, I've been watching these on my laptop, so I have my earphones on. So all I do is I just plug my nose and I'm good. As long as it doesn't find a way in my eye. Ugh. David, I'm not into this kind of stuff. Uh-uh. Mm-mm. Parasites. Nah. Blah, 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 blah.
yeah. So let's move on. So
All
that's
right, moving
actually
on.
all the episodes from 2009. Because episode 9 and 10 again was a double premiere. Episode 9 and 10 was again a double premiere on January 1st of 2010. What?
Something happened. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Why can't you hear me?
Everything says it's connected.
Did your let's see. I've got microphone thing coming up here. Discord
Let me
says it's
disconnect and then
working.
reconnect my headphones.
Honestly, y'all, we've had so much trouble this episode. I don't even know what's going on with it.
Okay, now we're good. I don't know what happened there.
I honestly don't know. That's a good question. Anyway, as
Anyways,
I said,
continue with what you were saying.
episode 9 and 10 both came out on January 1st of 2010. Um, episode 9, entitled Grievous Intrigue. Quote for that episode was, for everything you gain, you lose something else. And episode 10, entitled The Deserter, a quote from that episode, it is the quest for honor that makes one honorable. So maybe I just missed it, but I didn't pick up that these two episodes were part of an arc. When I looked
Well,
up
so
the arcs in season 2, it said that these two episodes were, but they're not the story. the storyline, like they take place in the same campaign, I guess, but the storylines aren't really that connected.
Well, that's the gist of it, because I mean that's all that they're looking for in the arc. The reason it's an arc is because the first episode takes place with them trying to capture General Grievous, and then after General Grievous escapes and rockets himself down to the planet below, this is them following him and trying
Hmm.
to capture him. So that's why it's an arc, even though the first episode focuses more on General Grievous, and the second episode focuses more on, as it stated, the deserter. Focuses on this clone who has deserted the
Hmm.
clone army.
Yeah.
So, but
So yeah, basically episode 9 starts off. Grievous has captured East Koth, and so Anakin and Obi-Wan have to go to Adigalia, right?
sure,
Adigalia.
I don't know her name.
They go save her, or save East Koth, him, um, from Grievous. So that's basically the premise of this. And in the process, they're also trying to capture Grievous.
Hmm. Now, obviously, as I've already stated, they fail in this specific instance, and Grievous gets rocketed down to the ship, to the planet below. I do want to mention we need to speed up our summaries of these episodes because we're already at an hour. So, and we're only halfway through, not even halfway through if we're on episode 9. So, but, um, anyways, so honestly, there's not that much that happens in that first episode because all it is they rescue Heathcote and attempt to capture Grievous. Now, obviously, as per the Clone Wars, because of the line that is in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin still never comes in contact with General Grievous. Um, so it's interesting always to see how they go about doing that. But um, Grievous escapes, goes down to the surface below, and so episode 10 picks up with them searching for him down on the surface.
Hmm. And this episode really follows Rex because he gets separated from the rest of the army, and of course comes in contact with a clone deserter.
So the way he ends up getting separated, him and his, I think, four other people, four other his troops are out and don't get necessarily ambushed, but kind of get ambushed with one of them shooting Rex with a sniper and injuring him pretty badly. I think Jesse is that the name of the medic? The name they give?
I
I know
think so.
Jesse's one of them. I'm just trying to remember if this. Anyways, he says that an inch or two over, and it would have been his heart. So he comes up with a near-death experience, but they end up finding. Well, they figure out that they're on a farm. They go to the farmer, and the farmer's wife allows them to stay in the barn. Come to find out a little bit later, after they've left, and Rex is there alone. The farmer is a cloak.
Mm. Yeah, so basically the main premise of the episode is Rex kind of as the quote kind of hints at Rex just basically changing his opinion of this clone because at the beginning he's like, "Oh, you're a deserter. You're just you just came out here because you don't want to you're forsaking your honor and stuff." But
You're a
basically he
coward.
comes to the coward, yeah. Basically he comes to the realization that you're not actually you're not a coward. You just don't want to you know fight a war that you don't believe
Yeah,
in.
I
Basically.
he even mentions he was like, you know, because this clone was apparently part of the first batch that went and fought on Geonosis, Geonosian, the Geonosian battle, whatever. If I can
Geonosis.
speak.
Why can you not get right?
Cuss! Alright. Genesis. Exodus. Um, so, anyways. Um, but he talks about that. He talks about how after that his ship was hit and they crashed and all the men were getting slaughtered. He thought this was it. He ended up escaping and he was like, "Why should I end up dying in a war that don't understand, have no real stake in?" And so he left. Um, and at the end of the episode, uh, this I don't remember what they end up calling the guy, but his wife asks if Rex is going to turn in this clone deserter because Rex had been saying that multiple times throughout the episode, and he says it's my duty to, but I'm not doing the greatest right now, so who knows what I remember from any of this, and kind of leaves it at that and just moves on his way, and
Mm.
that's how we leave this episode, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah. And we get into more of the, I guess ethics of the clones, more, and I think in Bad Batch when the Order 66 takes place and the Empire is trying to phase them out. Um, but it is one of those things where, yeah, this is not a war that they decided to fight in. This is a war that they were made to fight in. It's not their choice. This is how they're programmed. And they might be humans of a sort. Um, biologically, but they are clones and they do have some programming in them. And yeah, this is just how they're programmed
Now,
to
I,
think.
I know we need to continue on because we're kind of, we're just now halfway through with this next episode. But I want to pitch or ask you what your opinion on this. So in this episode, we see this clone and his wife, who is a Twi'lek, have kids. So they're I guess human Twi'lek hybrids, which we also see in Rebels with Jason. They look nothing alike.
I don't know how the genes mesh and how they decide that, these kids came out looking like Twi'leks and then how in uh
And
in
it's not
Rebels
even
what's his face comes out.
it's
I
not
don't know.
even it's not even the fact of like how like with in the real world animal hybrids, like depending on what the you know the let's say like the difference between like a liger and a Tygon is depending on, whether the lion was the mother or the father, or the tiger was the mother or the father.
Yeah.
It's the same case in this because, it's human father, Twi'lek mother in both cases, so you can't even make that argument.
Honestly, before you even said that, my first thought was maybe it depends on which species has the more dominant genes. But that would be a across the board thing, which would mean that if this was the case, then whatever the kid's name is in Rebels, not in Rebels, but their son is in Rebels, should be a Twi'lek, if that were somewhat of the case. So I don't know how they decide. It's a flip of the dice.
Sometimes you get a more Twi'lek looking kid, sometimes you get a human with green hair. Okay.
Well, I wonder why, because like you think about it, like in the real world, right? So we got like mixed people, right? And
Mhm.
like that makes sense because that's just it's a mix. Like that makes sense. But we don't get mixed species in Star Wars, like it's not a mix between a Twi'lek and a human. I mean, they're obviously humanoid and they look mostly like humans, but they obviously aren't. They also aren't human. But like, we don't get that either. Like, they usually look mostly fully one or fully the other. Like, what is the kid's name? And what is their kid?
Jason? Jason Sindula.
Jason. Okay, I thought it might have been Jason, but I wasn't entirely sure. Uh, Jason doesn't have little flaps coming out of the back of his head, looking like they're about to be tails. So yeah, I don't know what the deal is with all that. Because, like you said,
Yeah,
our genetics in the real world do not work the way that they look like they work in Star Wars.
yeah, because like I said, like I said, it would make sense if they both looked the same, the kids in this and Jason, or if let's say one of them was a human woman and a Twi'lek man. But it doesn't, it's the same
They weren't
case, but
they
different
weren't thinking about
outcomes.
that.
Yeah, I
They
know.
weren't thinking about that.
Anyway,
Yeah.
moving on to episode 11. This one's a one-off. I'm just gonna sum it up real quick. Episode 11, Lightsaber Lost, first aired on January 22nd. Again, that's a 3-week gap with no new episodes from the
Their
last
gaps
two.
are very inconsistent. It's interesting to
Yeah.
note that.
The quote from this episode was, "Easy isn't always simple." Basically, the premise of this is, while on Coruscant, Ahsoka's lightsaber gets pickpocketed, and she doesn't want to admit that she lost it to Anakin, so she gets the help of this old Jedi Master in the temple, and they go off on this big hunt to find the thief, and of course, inevitably end up finding him, and getting
Mhm.
Ahsoka getting her lightsaber back. It is a fun episode, but there's not really much to it.
There's not much to it. I didn't really enjoy watching this episode. Um, I well, do we remember the Jedi's name?
I can find out.
I also believe that this is the first instance that we see a white lightsaber. Unless it was a really, really faint blue. I'm pretty sure he had a white lightsaber, which was interesting to note if I'm remembering that correctly. Um, that he uses. But throughout this episode, essentially, Ahsoka is just learning a lot of patience because this is an old Jedi, like ancient, and he moves slower than Yoda. Basically, if you want to endure what um, Ahsoka endures in this episode, go play Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga, play as Yoda, and walk across the map. No lightsabers allowed. But it's also it's very interesting because like obviously they end up finding the lightsaber and huh,
Jedi Master Terra Sanube.
Terra Sanube. Honestly, I love this character. Like I know,
Mm,
yeah, I think we end up seeing him a little bit later. He's a great character. It's one of those old wise characters that like is always right. He's very observant. They showed that a lot in this episode, which allows him to be a little slower, kind of knowing where he needs to be. But
hmm
yeah, that's basically the whole premise of the episode. We don't need to dive too much into it.
And he teaches Ahsoka a lesson on patience and stuff during the episode. But
Exactly,
it's just
exactly.
there's not. It's a good episode, but there's nothing really bearing on the rest of the series from this episode. Now, this
Yeah.
next arc, on the other hand, has a lot to do with the rest of the series.
Yes. Now,
Um,
David, I kind of think that it's probably best for our purposes to sum up the overarching story of this next arc as opposed to each individual episode.
yes, so I'm gonna go through and uh introduce each episode, and then we'll go through the story arc, whole arc. So episode 12, 13, and 14. Episode 12 is The Mandalorian Plot, originally airing on January 29th of 2010. Episode 13 is Voyage of Temptation, originally airing on February 5th. And episode 14 is Duchess of Mandalore, originally airing on February 12th. The from quotes are from episode 12. If you ignore the past, you jeopardize the future. Episode 13, fear not the future. Weep Not for the Past, and episode 14, In War, Truth is the First Casualty. So, Wesley, why don't you go ahead and kind of start off summing up the story of this arc?
Yeah, so this obviously is the first Mandalorian arc that we get. We get introduced to Duchess Satine, who we find out is a old friend of Obi-Wan. We find out a little bit more about their backstory in the next episode. But essentially the whole entire idea is Obi-Wan goes to Mandalore, kind of using his relation with Duchess Satine to find out what's going on. So there's been some rumors going around that apparently the Mandalorians and Duchess Satine being the leader of them, are building an army to help out the separatists. And the Republic has had some attacks by Mandalorians. Obi-Wan shows some proof of this. But anyways, so what ends up happening throughout this whole entire arc is essentially Duchess Satine, the we are introduced to the terrorist organization Death Watch, which is being funded by the Separatists. And throughout this, Duchess Satine's life, she's has many assassination attempts made on her. Death Watch's goal is obviously to take over Mandalore. They want Duchess Satine dead, but their hope and their goal is to get the Mandalorian people on their side, and to do that, they want the Republic to occupy um the world of Mandalore, and by having the military occupation, kind of get the people to rebel against that, and then join Death Watch, which would make them taking over the planet a lot easier. Um, but this is the first introduction of Death Watch. Obviously, Death Watch comes into play a lot later on in the series, with Maul coming back and all that stuff. Um, but we get to see a lot of the dynamic between Satine and Obi-Wan, a lot of their differing views. Duchess Satine is a pacifist. She is against the war. She heads up the some society of neutral planets, and she wants Mandalore to stay neutral. Mandalore is known for being a warrior society, but that is something that Duchess Satine is trying to leave in the past.
And that's
Whereas
also
Death
something
Watch is
with,
trying
yeah.
to make it, yeah, Death Watch is trying to make it what Mandalore is.
So basically, yeah, through all this, we're also introduced to Pre Vizsla, um,
Hmm.
who is also another recurring character throughout the rest of the series. Um,
Leader of Death Watch
the leader of the Death Watch, yes. Um,
and holder of the dark saber.
yes, we also got to see the Darksaber for the first time. They
And
didn't
let's talk
dive
about
into
this.
they didn't dive into what it is, but we got to see it.
Let's talk about this. So Obi-Wan and Previs, yeah, Previsla, right? No,
Yep.
yeah, okay,
Yeah, it's Pre Vizsla.
okay. Anyways, get in a fight, and essentially Obi-Wan wins because Previsla forfeits. So who is the owner of the dark saber now? Obi-Wan Kenobi. I know it's technically a death, like you have to win through death. But if you forfeit, then you should just die. But Obi-Wan Kenobi with the dark saber. How much would that be? How cool would that be to see? Get that Jedi stance.
I guess that's the alternate universe where he leaves the Jedi Order to be with Satine.
Kenobi the great. I was gonna say
Yeah,
Kenobi the ultimate. I mean, there's obviously all those adjectives have been used for all the different Mandalorian,
Mandalorians. Yeah,
but he'd probably be the best. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know how good the was it. Is it Mandalore the Ultimate that was the jet? Who's the one that made the dark saber? because he was a Jedi.
Was it Mandalore the Great or was it?
That's what I'm trying to. I don't remember. We're not going to
Oh, I
dive
don't
that
know.
deeply into it. We'll have a deeper dive into Mandalorian history at some later date. But Obi-Wan would still be up there, definitely. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really want to overlook these episodes too much. But essentially, the whole entire gist of it is, uh, Death Watch's goal of trying to get, um, well, Death Watch, but the Separatists through Death Watch trying to get, um, Republic occupation, and then having having second I disconnected, and we'll get this back up and running. Okay, I apologize for the stutter step in there. Um, but I'm back. Um, but yeah, so essentially just the Death Watch through, or Separatists through Death Watch is trying to get Republic occupation, and Satine is trying to remain neutral as much as possible, so she does not want, Republic occupation. Now, I will mention this. Now, obviously, they dive into it a little bit later on, um, with the fact that she believes, and, well, I don't know if she necessarily believes this, but they do make the comment that Mandalore does have an army to defend
Mm.
itself. But I don't think throughout most of these episodes, Satine really takes. She doesn't respect Death Watch as the organization that it is. She thinks it's just essentially the way that she sums it up is like a band of teenage boys over here that are just vandalizing things. When it's actually a military organization, essentially, at this
It,
even at this point in time.
it's a basically a like anti-government militia. It's
Yeah. It's not looking good for her. And I get her pacifist views, as in she doesn't want to fight, but the thing that and obviously this is part of the conflict that her and Kenobi have throughout the episodes, but it's like you can't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in, even if that comes to fighting. Like if you're like as Jedi, right? The Jedi are keepers of the peace. Now, do they go a little overboard in the Clone Wars? Sure, of course they do. But part of being keepers of the peace, you sometimes have to fight to keep the peace. That's why throughout
that's
centuries the Jedi have a lightsaber. They're
yeah.
they're not supposed to be fighters, but they have to know how to fight so as to keep the peace and keep those who will not keep the peace or not negotiate from doing it. Like Anakin. Anakin dives headfirst in every situation. We see that in the an episode 2 before, how he wanted to just dive headfirst and fight in the situation with the Queen Mother from Geonosis. But shut up. But shut up. But uh Obi-Wan, the negotiator, um, wanted to talk. And that's how the Jedi operate. And Satine gets on
Mm.
Kenobi a lot in this arc for being a general in an army. And it's like, yes, he's a general in the army. Yes, he does fight. But he fights because if he doesn't fight, the enemy wins, and then there is no peace. If
Mm.
Satine isn't willing to fight Death Watch and take Death Watch seriously, she dies, her people die, and everything that every belief that she holds dear dies with it. Because that's the thing. Like, and obviously some of these things do end up happening. Death Watch does end up taking control. And a lot of it maybe stems to this problem here. And I know that obviously Republic occupation is painted as the bad option in this. And I'm not saying that it's the best option. What I'm saying is I don't think that she takes it seriously enough in this. And I feel like that might end up having some effect on the downfall of Mando later on when Death Watch does take over.
Mm. Yeah. All in all, this arc was probably my favorite in the series or in this season. Um,
Hmm.
just because it does start to get into the Mandalore stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a really good. Now the next three episodes we have are all standalone episodes. Um, so episode 15, Senate Murders, first airing on March 19th of 2010. Um, quote is searching for the truth is easy, accepting the truth is hard. Now, this one again is not. It's it's an okay episode. There's not really a whole lot of bearing on the rest of the series. Basically, there are essentially there's a murder of a senator, and it's kind of a whodunit episode.
Hmm.
Um, so there's not
Now,
really a whole lot of Good.
I do want to mention this because this brought another thing up in my mind within Star Wars politics. So in this episode, the beginning of it starts out with Padme wanting to or there's a bill trying to be passed in the Senate, basically to up the funds so that there can be more production of clones for the war effort, right? And Padme is essentially against that. She wants to lessen the production of clones, and that's kind of the fight back and forth. And then one of her friends slash advisors, one of the other senators, ends up getting killed, and that's how the rest of it episode goes. Who done
Mhm.
it? Yada yada. Now, my thought with this though, and I understand like kind of where she's coming from, but why would you want to lessen the production of the fighting force that you have? Because her argument is that she wants diplomacy to take over, and she wants the fighting to stop. Well, one, if you're constantly doing what you're doing right now, you're not going to change anything. So if you up your forces, then you might have a better chance of, overrunning the separatists, right? Uh, Two, diplomacy is not going to come back until y'all are able to win the war or back the separatists into a corner where they have to be diplomatic, right? Because right now they're focused on their goals, which don't align with your goals, and now we're fighting. And it's like
See,
if diplomacy worked in every situation, we would never have war. But there's a reason we
okay,
have wars. It's because
see,
people want to fight over it instead of actually just talk.
Padme's argument would work if the Republic were the aggressor.
Exactly.
But the
It's
Republic
it's
is
it's
responding to the violence.
Mhm. Exactly. So how do you respond to the violence? I was about to say, how do you respond to violence with more violence? I mean, sometimes you fight fire with fire, but it's the same. It's the same thing that I was kind of going off on with the last part, right? Where, yeah, the Republic is responding to the aggressiveness of the Separatists. Satine should be responding to the aggressiveness of Death Watch. You can't be a pacifist in either one of these scenarios. And if the other side isn't willing to talk, then you can't talk with them. So you have to get the situation under control before you can do things how you want it to be done. And that's
Mm,
one thing that I just am sitting here and I'm like, these are all the good guys. These are all the people that they want you to root for, but they're doing some stupid things right now. So how am I supposed
mm,
to root for them? But it was a
yeah,
one-off episode. It kind of is what it is, but I kind of got myself over here arguing with Star Wars politics. I'm gonna get more into Star
yeah,
Wars politics and real world politics.
yeah. So episode 16, Cat and Mouse, originally airing March 26, 2010. The quote from this episode is, "A wise leader knows when to follow." So, again, it's a one-off episode, but, this, of course, we're introduced to Admiral Trench for the Separatists. Basically the premise of this episode is there's a separatist blockade around Christophsis. Now, I don't know if this is pre-movie or post-movie. Because obviously it's taking place, around Christophsis, but I don't know when this is on the timeline. Because Ahsoka's not in this episode, I don't think. So it could be pre-movie. Um, but anyway, basically, yeah, separatist blockade. They're trying to get supplies down to the civilians on Christophsis. Because Bail Organa's got a I don't know why he's on Christophsis and not Alderaan, but
I know. I kind of zoned out right when the episode started, and then I came back in. And I was like, "Oh, what's Bell Organa doing here?"
yeah. Um, so yeah, the supplies they're trying to get supplies down to the civilians, and basically, uh, it's the episode is about them doing that, and of course, having to contend with Admiral Trench, who's kind of a Thrawn-esque character, like a very very brilliant military mind, basically.
Mm-hmm. Which, correct me if I'm wrong. Whenever this ends up taking place, we see him again, right? Because I was about to say I remember him being a little disformed later on, which I would assume would be from this.
Yeah, I think
But
they do. I
we do
think he does
see
come
him.
back with like the cybernetics or whatever.
Yeah, so they defeat him, kill him, which I guess this would be another instance of them thinking he's dead and him not being dead. But anyways, that's not too important for this. They succeed, and we can move on to the next episode.
Yeah. So this is the episode you were referencing earlier. Episode 17,
Hmm.
Bounty Hunters, originally airing April 2nd of 2010. The quote from this episode is, "Courage makes heroes, but trust builds friendships." So basically, from this episode, I've been saying basically a lot this episode.
Basically, you are.
Essentially, the plot of this episode is um Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka crash land on Felucia, and they find this farm and they're trying to get, a ship to get off this planet. And the only ship on this farm is the ship that belongs to bounty hunters. Now, the bounty hunters are there because the villagers hired them to defend the village against pirates. And of course, pirates are none other than crew of everyone's favorite pirate, Kondo Onaka.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was in um this episode specifically, and I didn't really think about it when they mentioned pirates. But yeah, it's one of those things where Hondo's always out for his best interest, which is kind of surprising that he doesn't back down with Anakin and Obi-Wan there, because he knows what they can do.
Mm,
Um, but he decides to still attack the village and try and get what he wants out of it. Um, but we did get to see Imbo, MB,
Imbo, yeah, Imbo.
Imbo. I thought that was his name, but I couldn't remember. One of my favorite characters, simply because of his head shield, and then like the style, like I don't know, he's a really cool character.
Mm,
Um, but we get to see him, um, which is interesting. He kind of flip flops, like I was talking about earlier. How some bounty hunters, on the extreme side of villainy, and then some are just kind of on, just doing the odd jobs to help people out. He's kind of a little back and forth. Starting off with this, he's helping people out, but later on we see him doing jobs with Cad Bane too. So he's kind of all over the place on where his
mm,
alliances, are. He kind of just does what he can for money, which is
mm.
respectable as a bounty hunter.
Now,
But
well, well,
go ahead.
one thing I do want to point out is this episode has one of has probably my favorite quote from season two, and it's one of Hondo's quotes. I don't know why I found this so funny, but when Hondo is, getting ready to attack, and his men are getting ready to attack the village, he he says, it's like I always say, speak softly and drive a big tongue. I don't know
Oh yeah.
why. Thought that was so funny when it came up. Anyway, that's just a side note.
Hey,
I might make that the quote for this video.
speak softly and drive a big tank is a great quote. And words to live by. Words to live by,
Mm.
honestly. But yeah, I mean, honestly, there's not that much to talk about with this episode. Um, you know, the reason the Jedi are there is because they were looking to check on a medical facility that was orbiting the planet. Ended up getting shot down. Found out that the medical facility is gone, destroyed or whatever, and that's essentially the gist of it. So at the end of this episode, they you know they leave with the bounty hunters. They kind of they ran the pirates off. They also trained the farmers how to fight, and that's kind of the gist of that episode. So now we can move on to our last two arcs from the season, rounding out the season. But first arc we come in contact with is the Zillow Beast arc.
So yes, episode 18 and 19. Um, episode 18 entitled The Zillow Beast, originally airing on April 9th, 2010. Quote from this episode is choose what is right, not what is easy. And episode 19, entitled The Zillow Beast Strikes Back. Obviously a reference to episode 5. Um, not episode 5 of Clone Wars or the season, but the movie episode 5.
Yeah,
Um,
episode 5 of the Clone Wars, which is landing at Point Rain, and is where they stroke back on the Geonosians. Reference point made. Score separatists.
yeah,
Yay, go team.
original,
Anyways,
originally airing on April 16th of 2010. The quote from this episode is, "The most dangerous beast is the beast within." So, there's not really a whole lot to say about this arc.
he got that dog in him. Gotta be scared of that dog.
It introduced the Zillow Beast, which, um, do we see it again in Clone Wars? I think we do.
I think so.
I know we see it again in Bad Batch.
Yeah, the
Um,
Zillow Beast, I think, is still important. I don't know if we see it again, but it is the strange thing about it is whether we see it or not. The Zillow Beast is kind of a staple of the Clone Wars, like early season Clone Wars. You know,
mm,
like I know in the Lego Star Wars: The Clone Wars or the Star Wars 3 Lego game that they made, like the final boss is the Zillow Beast. Um,
mm,
and so, you know, it is a important thing that happens, and obviously there is more to be set up with the Zillow Beast as they take it away and are running tests on it and all that fun stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you said, there's not really that much that happens besides we find out that there's this creature, the Zillow Beast, that is impervious to everything, including lightsaber strikes.
mm.
So,
Basically, they find it on this planet that wherever the Dugs are from. I don't remember the name of the planet. Um, they encounter it on this planet. Uh, manage to stun it and take it back to Coruscant, where it then escapes, and then they have to deal with it on Coruscant, where it inevitably ends up dying.
so thank
Sort of thing. And then at the end, Palpatine orders one of the scientists to continue running experiments on it and I believe also clone it, correct? Yeah.
Yep. Which one way or
Because
another is probably what we end up seeing in Bad
because
Batch.
this Zillo Beast is supposed to be the last of its kind.
Yeah. Now, I'm not entirely sure if I remember too much, but I think whether or not it's in Bad Batch or near the end of the season with Clone Wars, um, but series Clone Wars, sorry. But I believe we see at one point the Zillo Beast growing with electricity.
I think that's in Bad Batch.
Yeah,
Anyway,
but we'll we'll get around to it.
which brings us to our last arc, being the Boba Fett arc of season 2. So that's episode 20, 21, and 22. Episode 20 is entitled Death Trap, originally airing on April 23rd of 2010. The quote from this episode is, "Who my father was matters less than my memory of him." Episode 21, name is R2 Come Home, uh, originally airing on April 30th of 2010. The quote from this episode is, "Adversity is a friendship's truest test." And episode 22, Lethal Trackdown, also airing on April 30th of 2010. And the quote from this episode is, "Revenge is a confession of pain." So, Wesley, I
Well,
know
David,
you said you only watched the first episode in this arc. So, why don't you
okay,
sum up
what's the first?
Death Trap?
I watched 1.5 episodes of this arc.
Right. So, why don't you sum
Yeah.
up
So
Death Trap?
essentially, all that happens in Death Trap is, somehow or another, Boba ends up getting in one of the cadet crews or uh, groups, whatever they call them. He is portraying as a cadet that gets on a Jedi Star Destroyer, or Star Cruiser with the two Jedi being Mace Windu and Anakin. Now Mace Windu being the one that he's after, because obviously, as we all know, Mace Windu killed Jango Fett. So Boba Fett has a vendetta against Mace Windu and wants him dead. So you know, we're I think this is the first time we're introduced to Boba Fett in the Clone Wars. Um, and obviously we know something's up with this guy, but we kind of don't really know what. Um, you know, people might have thought he was Boba Fett with the long hair, but you never really know. But essentially, what he does is he plants a bomb on Mace Windu's quarters or at the door, and Mace Windu is about to go in, but then he gets called to the bridge with to talk to Skywalker, and he has a clone put something in his room, and in the process, the clone gets blown up instead of Mace Windu. And by the end of the episode, everyone's getting to the escape pods, and the ship goes down and crashes on the planet below, which is where the next episode takes place or picks up.
Mhm. So, I forget the name of the admiral, but basically the admiral in charge of the ship goes down with the ship when it's crashing. And so do a couple other clones. So Mace Windu and Anakin go down to the crash site to see if there's any survivors. And they don't find any survivors, but they do find several clones that look like they've been executed. And in the middle of the wreckage of the bridge, there is a Mandalorian helmet, which is rigged to explode. The explosion pins um, Mace Windu and Anakin under a bunch of rubble, and of course the trap was set by Boba Fett and his bounty hunter friends, being Aura Singh, Bosk, and I forget the other guy's name.
He's not important.
Well, he dies in the
Or
next
saying
episode,
and
so
I was like, or Singh and Bosk are the big head bounty hunters. The other guy's just a dumb lizard.
No, Bosk is the lizard.
He's a lizard type.
Okay. But, so anyway, basically they rigged up this whole thing. Basically, the premise of this episode is R2 has to get help and somehow manages to get through a series of events. Somehow manages to get all the way back to Coruscant on his own. I don't know if you got this far in the episode.
Nope.
But yeah, he gets back to Coruscant by himself and gets Plo Koon
Wow.
and Ahsoka for help. They come rescue Anakin and Mace Windu. Um, Now, at the end of this episode, it's revealed that the bounty hunters had the Admiral and two other clones as captives, hostages. So in episode 22, Lethal Trackdown, they use their hostages to try to lure Mace Windu out to try to kill him. This whole arc is about Boba trying to kill Mace Windu.
Yeah.
And so through the process of trying to lure him out, um, I believe it's. I just watched this yesterday, so I don't know why I'm blanking on this. But I believe it's Plo Koon and Ahsoka that track down the um bounty hunters, and of course
That's
they
what the
end up.
description reads.
Okay, so yeah, and of course they end up finding them, and the admiral ended up getting shot because um basically they were trying to get leverage, so they killed off the you know um they started killing off hostages. Now, interesting about that is Aura Singh told Boba to shoot one of the clones. He shot the Admiral instead. He hesitated with the gun to the clone's head, and then shot the Admiral, hinting that he might have some amount of you know familial bond with the clones, being that he's
Yeah.
I think in episode 20, one of the cadets says, like, you're our brother, and he's like, I'm not your brother, or something like that. But this kind of shows that maybe he doesn't necessarily 100% believe that. Um,
Well, I think even in Death Trap, at one point when the ship's going down and everything, he gets control of one of the other clone's guns, and I think he ends up stunning the clone as opposed to actually just outright shooting him.
mhm. So it's interesting his dynamic with the clones being that, like, you know he's an unaltered clone, but Boba still is a clone.
Yeah, and technically they are his brothers still. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
also like shooting someone with your face, so
Yeah, it's still kind of weird. Anyway, so
yeah.
that's um Ahsoka and Plo Koon, finding the tracking down the bounty hunters and rescuing the hostages is where season 2 ends.
Now, I do want to mention this with all that. This is kind of a lesser thing to it, but we get introduced to Boba Fett in the Clone Wars with this arc. We also get to see Boba Fett starting to get to the point that we see him later on in Clone Wars, and then obviously we see him in Bad Batch like this. But Boba Fett very quickly turns himself into um I guess you can say one of the best bounty hunters out there. He very quickly takes the reputation his dad had as the best and lives up to the reputation. Even before he's capable of doing things himself because he's still a kid and not a man, um, he is able to plan and strategize and operate multiple people in whatever scenario he's having to deal with. And then once he becomes a man, becomes an adult, he just takes all that tactical knowledge that he had to use as a kid and just adds on to it because now he has the physical capabilities of doing things himself. Um,
Hmm.
which makes things hard. And I mean, even in the series, obviously it never aired, but there is a demo that once got leaked of him and Cad Bane having a fight, and I think this is how they explained the dent in the helmet. Although I think the dent is explained in Attack of the Clones, I'm not entirely sure. But anyways, how him and Cad Bane have a fight, have a duel, and it kind of just comes out as a draw. But Cad Bane is trying to be the number one bounty hunter, but now you got this up and comer who is trying to take the limelight from you. And not only is it's not just some random up and comer. It's it's the kid of the guy who you were trying to best for the longest time already.
Hmm. Which that's also an interesting thing too, because I think in that duel, because it's kind of hard to tell because it's not a finished animation; it's just a sketch, or just a series of
Mhm.
sketches. But in that, so if I'm not mistaken, Cad Bane is known for using slug throwers, correct?
Something along those lines.
Which I think is what he uses in this duel, because a blaster wouldn't dent Beskar.
Yeah. I think whether that's what he is known for or not, that is I think what he does end up using because yeah, it's supposed to have dented the helmet
Yeah.
in some
Well, and
capacity.
also, I'm also not 100% sure if the that armor, Django's and Boba's, is pure Beskar, because I think, you know, there's the whole thing of like, the Mandalorians, because of the rarity of Beskar, had started diluting it with other horror metals. So I don't know if the
Hmm.
that armor is pure Beskar. I think the only Mandalorian we've seen on screen who has pure Beskar armor is Din Djarin. But
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we can do some more research into that because I'm not entirely sure one way or another on that. Your reasoning sound in my mind, but I don't know one way or another on that. But yeah, that is something that comes up later on. So there is more to talk about with Boba Fett in the Clone Wars. He does come up a lot more later on, and his rivalry with Cad Bane will start soon, and is something to that is very interesting. Despite Boba's age, he is advanced beyond his years. So, David, we have been recording for almost 2 hours. It's probably a good idea if we were to get closer to wrapping up here. But let's go ahead and give our final thoughts on the season and get all this wrapped up.
so, is there anything you missed talking about? Any standout episodes you want to highlight real quick, or any extremely bad episodes you want to you know wave people away from?
Don't watch Tenet Spy. It's trash. But if you love Attack of the Clones, then just eat that one up. I'll say this. This was a really good season. Obviously, anything with Cad Bane, I love. So the first three episodes were amazing. I completely forgot about the Geonosis arc. Shut up. Anyways, uh, but I completely forgot about that arc. But I really liked those episodes too. They were really fun to watch and really entertaining. Um, and then outside of that, obviously anything to do with Mandalore is always fun to watch. So I'll enjoy that one too. Outside of that, the rest of them were good episodes, not the best, not anything too extravagant. The General Grievous arc with the episode about the deserter, again, good, but not that great. Just kind of average. And yeah, you know, if I were to watch him again, I'd probably watch the Holocron heist, Return to Geonosis, and Mandalore. Those would probably be the only episodes that I would go back to.
yeah, those three arcs. I would include the Boba Fett arc as a fourth, but those arcs are the highlight of season two. Um,
I'll say this. Obviously, you can say that I haven't seen it recently. I remember enough about the Boba Fett arcs and having watched the first episode. It's not that they're bad. It's a bad arc, in my opinion. Um, but it's not really something that I would go out of my way to watch. Now, again, this is my opinion. You know, you are feel free to have your own. But for me personally, it's alright. It's just not my cup of
mm,
tea.
yeah, if you want just some like standalone episodes where you don't have to watch an arc, I would say, even though it's part of an arc, I would say The Deserter is a good like kind of more standalone episode. Lost Lightsaber, like I said, not really important to the overall plot of the series, but it is a really fun episode. And
Me personally, on the point you're making, me personally, if you only want to watch one episode, no arc from this season, Lost Lightsaber is probably the best
yeah,
single episode in this series.
yes. Also, Bounty Hunters, strictly because I love Hondo. That's,
Yes, if you're a Hondo lover,
but
Bounty
I would
Hunters is a
agree.
great
But
episode.
I would agree of the standalone episodes, Lost Lightsaber is the best because, like I said, it's not. It doesn't really tie into anything else, but it's just such a fun episode to watch.
Yeah, and I don't even really understand why. I just really enjoyed watching it. So you
Hmm.
know, but yeah, you know, it was a good season. I personally think that season one was still a little bit better. I think it had some better arcs to it. Um, from me just remembering it right now. But still a good season. Obviously, I rushed through this season as opposed to taking a little bit more time watching season one. Also, watching through season one, a lot of those I had seen multiple times before. Um, this one I was a little bit unfamiliar with the episodes. Not ones that I had watched as much. I think season two is, if I kind of look through the catalog of episodes in all the seasons, I think season two is one of the seasons that I don't touch as much when it comes to rewatching the Clone Wars. Why that is, I don't really know. I guess none of them really stand out to me. But I know I've rewatched the Clone Wars plenty of times, and I know I've watched a lot of the other seasons more. I remember a lot more of the other episodes, and season two is just one that doesn't really stand out to me.
Well, I mean, it's not like of course season three, which we're gonna talk about next week, or not next week, next month.
Month.
Um, I would say
So
like
don't do that to me again, David. I can't watch
season,
another season of Clone Wars in a week.
but season one and two are just kind of like, yeah, okay, it's it is what it is. But season three, I would argue, is where we start to get more okay, like we get the Mortis arc, we get the ARC troopers start out with. I believe we get a Mandalorian arc in season two as well. Um,
Season
it's
three.
just yeah, it's just we get a lot of stuff in season three, and that's kind of where or a lot of like really memorable stuff. Because like
Mm-hmm.
honestly, season one, the most memorable thing for me is the episode Rookies. I know we
Yeah.
just watched it recently, but that's still thing that's the most memorable. In season two, it's
Yeah.
probably the Geonosis arc, is what I remember mostly from it. But
Mm-hmm.
there's not really anything that's super stand out when you look at the series as a whole, which I think we're going to
Yeah.
get in season three.
Yeah, season three is definitely, just looking at the catalog of things, definitely has a lot more
Well,
memorable
we
episodes.
also get to we
Um,
also get the first look at the Dathomir stuff.
yeah,
I don't
and
think
we
we
get a
get
look at the
Maul yet, but
Citadel. We don't
I
get
think
Maul yet with this,
Maul
but we
season
get
four, I believe.
We get the Citadel. Yeah, we get the Citadel. Obviously, you mentioned the Mortis arc. We get Dathomir. Um, we get character of crap. What's his name? yellow streak across the eyes. We talked about him not too long ago. Um,
Um, uh, Dark Disciple, Quinlan
yeah.
Voss.
So, Quinlan Voss. We get to see Ventress. I saw a second ago in one of the yeah, with the arc. Um, we get to see Ventress. So there's a bunch of things in this that are more standout. But, obviously we're gonna get to that next week. Oh, anyways.
So yeah, if you want to hear us talk about more Clone Wars, come back on November 4th, and we'll have a brand new episode talking about Clone Wars Season 3. Let us on out to an outro, Wesley.
All right, thank you for sticking around all the way to the end of this episode. If you liked anything about this episode, please leave a like on the video. If you have any thoughts about the episode, leave a comment down below. And of course, as always, please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. With that, like David said, join us next week specifically for another episode next Monday, for another episode of X-Wing Radio. Until then, thanks for watching. I was Wesley Peak. David was David. And we are gone. Hit the light speed.